golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer and summer.
I don't have the coming in hot thing with a specific topic, and I think I'm so preoccupied with what I was talking about earlier, just this sort of state of experimentation, that I'm not thinking about anything else but sort of stabilizing all of the upheaval, the good upheaval that has resulted in this this huge shift in what I'm doing ever since really the cameras started becoming a thing, and not even just me buying them and selling them, but getting into photography and you introducing me to street photography and that whole world just like
ruining my
life. And now medium format, I'm just like, oh God, it keeps getting better but worse.
I want to explore something that you told me the other day, but first
yeah, congrats, man.
Officially, I guess this is the season 2,
the start of season 2.
So I don't know what that means. I don't know if anything will change. I like the idea of just doing each season as its own year, though.
Yeah, that's one thing that right there that's nice, is we have a decision on how we're going to do seasons. It's going to be a 1-year deal.
Banana. It's pretty smooth.
Good. Now we're drinking Jack Daniel's Bonded Tennessee whiskey. A little bougier bottle of old Jack Daniel's.
Old Jack.
That's pretty good, man.
I have some regular Jack, but
no, this is good.
Only the good stuff for
this is pretty
for studio
good.
Sessions. So yeah, if we get drunk, it's Friday afternoon.
I'm gonna get Thursday. Oh yeah. I'm gonna get a little loose with this. So
well, I do want to. Maybe we start here. I wanted to explore this. You called me before, you were leaving to go out of town, and you basically called me or I called you, and we talked for about an hour, and you were just talking about how you wanted to kind of realign everything.
Yeah.
You needed to kind of lay everything out on the table, figure out how much bandwidth you actually have.
Right.
And start getting rid of stuff.
That's right.
And so there's several ways in my head that we could approach this. We could approach it from the value conversation of like what things are producing the most value. Is that internal value? Is that external value? We could also approach it from the time, which things are taking up the most time.
Yeah.
Maybe that is connected or disconnected from value. But yeah, just, maybe you set the stage and then we can figure out a way to approach it. I mean, if you even want to talk about this, but I'm curious because I do think, one, I want to see how you contended with it, because it's something that it felt familiar.
Yeah.
When you mentioned, I was like, yeah, I've definitely been there, a couple times this year. I'm constantly kind of reshifting things and figuring out, okay, this doesn't fit. And I think most people do that pretty constantly. They're trying to constantly refine, or maybe not refine. Kind of points to there being an endpoint.
Yeah.
But just adjust. Kind of adjust the steering wheel. Maybe is a better. Yeah,
it's it's hard to find like a really appropriate analogy for what's been going on really since I started getting more into photography, and then that world opening up big changes on what I was doing with what I am doing with my YouTube channel and what I'm doing with the work that I'm making, both on the photography side, the video content I make, the articles I'm writing, all the different stuff that I'm doing. But it really created just a paradigm shift, an upheaval, a metamorphosis of where I was before, which was, a very streamlined way of living, a lot of productivity tools without being like toxic hustle culture kind of stuff. Coming out of everything that I learned from sort of those creative entrepreneurs that were talk on social media about design your life and set goals and all that kind of stuff. And then finding certain areas where there wasn't as much fulfillment with what I was doing or making. I'm now going on the complete opposite side of the spectrum.
Then you took mushrooms.
Kind of, took mushrooms. Throwing out a lot of that productivity stuff because I spend too much time in software and staring at to-do lists that end up being, a mile long with a bunch of cold tasks on them, feeling down about myself because I'm not, like having these big wins that like get me a big chunk of what my goal was taken care of. Feeling a little like I'm spending way too much time inside and not outdoors enough, understanding some of the other stuff we've looked at from the Century of the Self, and it's just all this stuff just creating so much upheaval in a good way. And now it's like, you've got all this stuff that's, the room's destroyed. There's stuff strewn about everywhere, and you got to kind of.
You've been excavating for a year.
Yeah, you got to kind of go through and go, well, what am I going to keep? What am I going to take with me? And what am I going to keep from sort of the old ways I was doing things? What am I going to bring in from what's new? And how am I going to streamline this a little bit, make it all a little bit more efficient, so I have some more concentration. And I felt that a lot coming back from.
I like the metaphor too here. You're everything's messed up.
I'm enjoying that.
You pulled all the stuff out of all the closets.
Yeah, everything's out there. Bought crap at the stores. Picked stuff up. Experimented with this. Do I like this? Tried this on. I kind of like that. It didn't work. This isn't the thing. Watching videos. There's this one channel, and I'll link it in the show notes, but there's this channel where this guy photographs artists in their studios, and most of them are in New York, and a lot of them are older artists. One was like 90 something years old. The other one's 70. Like these people that had like, a warehouse or a loft in Brooklyn before it was cool to live there. And just these beautiful studio spaces that, for some people might look like a mess, but I'm like, you're surrounded by all the stuff that not only sets the foundation for the energy and the vibe that you need to do your work, but then the actual practical tools that you need to make your work. So like a lot of that is very affirming in going to I call it the back studio, where I used to store a lot of equipment and film do my live streams. But all that stuff is just completely tore apart. I've got metal drawer chests that I'm going to set up for organizing tools and stuff that I'm selling on eBay. That's a whole thing in itself, possibly, scaling that back. And now that I kind of know the direction of my work a little bit more clearly, pulling back from using that as a tool to earn some extra money and get back to focusing on, making work both with my YouTube channel and hopefully continuing with photography and my photography channel. So when we talk about this stuff, I think it can sometimes feel like it's a bit of a therapy session for Matt, and I really want to try to find the connections that this might have to people who are listening, who might be, I don't know, afraid to kind of nuke the fridge a little bit and pull everything out of the closets and grab stuff on impulse from, a thrift store, an estate sale, or...
Well, you started to go there, but I was almost going to be like, what prompted this? Like, what behaviors prompted this shift in... I don't want to oversimplify it and just say mindset, but this shift in behavior, this shift in worldview, this shift in so many things. What behaviors prompted that? Like, how could somebody else, would you do it again if you could?
Yeah.
I think the answer is usually yes on things like that, but maybe not. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are there. And
yeah, I'd absolutely, do all this again. because I do think, when we're making our work, we're going to have these seasons or these shifts and our approach. And I think you watch a lot of, I've watched a lot of documentary or a biopic or something that just kind of tells the story of an artist's life and the work that they had. And maybe they created work that there was a certain look to it or a style to it that sort of they became known for, they became famous for. And then it was expected that they would just keep cranking out pieces that were related to that. I hear this a lot listening to music podcasts and bands that are playing songs they wrote 30, 40 years ago. And they're like, we're not those people anymore, but we have to play this music because this audience paid to listen to our hits.
Right.
Where they might be like, we would love to play, 30 new songs for you that are more connected to who we are now as artists and all that. And I feel like the music industry really suffers because whatever they are famous for, there's this, just especially if they have a prolific catalog, not that the Beatles are touring, but the Beatles, the Beach Boys, Pearl Jam, these big iconic bands that have all these songs that audiences come and they're like, okay, like my life will have meaning when I hear that song from high school, that, made me feel all my feelings. So, when I started my YouTube channel, Final Cut Pro Tutorials, as much as I enjoy doing them and still want to do them, I'm obviously interested in exploring other things. I want to experiment and try other stuff. I started the photography channel because that really, caught fire with me, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And then, of course, making work that I don't share on that photography YouTube channel with the hopes of making a zine or a book or, putting a showing together or something. I don't know. So I just really like embracing that evolution versus what got you sort of known and then doubling down on that repeatedly, niching down, doing what all the entrepreneurs say you should do for more sustained growth. And, like be one of the Final Cut guys. And the more you make those videos, the greater your subscriber base will grow, the greater your revenue will grow, all of that kind of stuff. And that's just not really the thing that is the most interesting to me. I want to do that stuff, but I don't want it to just do it exclusively. And unfortunately, sometimes I think that, and for those listening, maybe you can you can understand this a little bit. Sometimes when you have those shifts in this seasonality with what you're into, what you're interested in expressing, the things that you want to experiment with and the things that you want to make, sometimes it can have a real impact on the commerce side of what you're doing, and it certainly has for me. I think I'll come out of this with, some decisions and some focus, concentration on some things, and it'll pick back up to the point where I'm like, it's going to be better than what it was. Mm-hmm. But anytime you have that upheaval, that metamorphosis of what you're doing, I don't second guess myself, but I do ride that razor's edge of comfort. Not that I want to be comfortable, but that I just want to sort of know that financially it's going to have been worth the big step backward that it's been to do this and to experiment with all this stuff.
Do you think there's like fear there, or there's almost like a almost just like a tiredness that I'm kind of getting, like, just, I'm kind of like tired. There's maybe like an underlying like melancholy to it all. And I say that this might be me projecting but when I was looking for like a new direction to go.
Yeah.
The last time that I felt like a real shift in my work, I was looking for like a clear direction to take things, and I couldn't find it for a while.
Yeah.
And you almost feel like you're just wandering the side of a highway or something, and cars are blowing past, and you're just like, I have no idea where I'm going, and it's hot.
Yeah.
I'm sad. Like, that was my experience. That might not be everybody's experience, but I'm getting like a similar, and eventually you come out of it naturally. It's just something, and you've been through it before. It's like, you just have to continue moving forward.
Yeah.
And then eventually something just catches your interest that's totally all consuming, and then it's clear as day to go. And you have things that have caught your interest, so it's a little bit different, but it's not like you're searching for something to catch your interest. It's like you're searching through all of the things that have caught your interest of like what
stays and what.
Yeah, like almost what am I actually interested in here?
Right.
Like, okay, I've only got time for, 2 things not time. I hate that. But I've only got the attention for a couple of these things.
Yeah.
What goes?
Well, see, and probably at the surface, it does come across like a little bit sort of, adrift along the highway, maybe some melancholy to it and all that. But I think what I've tried to do is really understand and accept that if you found the quote unquote success that you're hoping to achieve, which essentially is just like a taste of real financial security, not ridiculous wealth or anything like that, but just what's it like to make stuff when you aren't worried about
just $25 million in an offshore bank account. That's it.
Because to me, honestly, one of my greatest fears at the same time of wanting financial security, one of my greatest fears is financial security, because it'll take the edge off. It'll take the immediacy and the real need to like make the next thing and figure out the next thing to get a little bit of money in the bank account to, get to the next level of whether it's my work or the content I create. So there's part of me that goes, it's likely that if that kind of outcome happened, that you would look back on this time as the most inspiring, invigorating, alive time that you had. I think a lot of people might look at what I'm going through if they could actually see my space, like the back studio and, where I'm creating things, and sort of that I'm buying this or acquiring these typewriters or, just doing like getting into music and collecting this and getting these things and then selling them and, whatever all this is in the videos I'm making, like dude's in like some kind of midlife crisis. And I think the big thing is it just coincides with that time of my life. I think this would have happened if I was 28 or 68.
Yeah.
But to me, it's just the result of using new tools to express myself in the ways that I wasn't for the first part of my adult life. And this goes back to the conversations that we've had in the past, where everything I was doing was utilizing an art form, whether it was screenwriting, filmmaking, this or that, using that for a commercial result. Mm-hmm. And I think the craziness that's going on right now is because I've broken free of that approach to the work, that everything is through this lens of finding commercial success and paying off my student loans or doing what's expected of me from culture to be a good-looking white dude who is living in the suburbs and has a 3-car garage and 2 nice cars and kids' college funds are being invested in, all that kind of junk. It's breaking away from hijacking art for a commercial outcome and actually just trying to connect with making work to make work and not having any thoughts about the money side when it comes to like the work. Now the content, is still commerce and art, I think, occupying a similar space. But now the balance has shifted. Instead of what it was before, like, well, if I make this Final Cut Pro video about these things, commerce is going to happen. It's shifted to where that's the lesser of the priorities, and the main priority is, what do I have to say about this, or what am I interested in showing, or whatever.
Now we do have your like part of this transition kind of captured on camera and on audio, which is awesome.
Yes, it's.
Do you feel like, and we can move into like a non-you topic.
Yeah, I know.
I don't want to like you don't feel like I'm putting you on the spot, but do you feel like it is more? It's interesting because you said midlife crisis, and I've never really put it through that lens, but is it maybe there's something to that where you're like having a realization that, like, you know, you've gone through the first half of your life and you're making work for other people, and there's no real benefit to that. So it's like you want to use the rest of your life to, like, it's not like you want to change what you're doing.
Right.
But you've spent half of it making work for people, and it has, like, you know, you've worked on cool projects. Like, you've gone on tour with so-and-so and such and done edits for such and such feature film and such documentary. And it's like, okay. Yeah. Cool. Do you feel like you're almost kind of at that point where you're just like, you know what, the second half is for me? Like, did you reach a point where you're just like, fuck this, like, I'm done doing it for other people, like, this has been for me anyways? And
I think a lot of that started just like with the power of the empowerment that you feel when a channel that you make and something that you make yourself, you know, to help people, you know, teaching Final Cut Pro to try to help people get better at it, resonates, and there's nobody else in the mix to help, you know, to influence what video you make. Now, there's, of course, like the system, right? Well, I want to keep getting views and adding subscribers, and you let the analytics and all that stuff sometimes hijack your perspective on what you're going to make because you're chasing numbers, and that's a very, I think, natural trap to fall into for anybody, even if you're not making work on the, you know, the commerce side, like for a YouTube platform. But if you're, like I was saying earlier, an artist that kind of gets known for this thing, and you just keep doubling down on that because it's moving things forward in that aspect of your life, whether it's financially or more gallery showings or, you know, whatever it is that you think is important to you. And maybe is, not to undermine if that stuff is important to somebody, that it's, you know, not valid. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I think that kind of burning down the house, when you have that realization, when you have that realization that, you know, I've done a lot of cool things, and I certainly am proud of the stuff that I've done, but ultimately I feel like it serves what someone else is trying to achieve, and I'm sort of a cog in that wheel, and sometimes I'm a really respected collaborator in that process, but there's something about, and granted, you could argue, well, you're a cog in the YouTube wheel, or you're a cog in the art world wheel. Like, you're always going to be a cog in the wheel. If you made some great gallery showing with your photographs, like, somebody who's quote unquote above you is going to try to co-opt that thing or absorb that thing. I don't think it's like a purity
argument, and you're going to get, if you get sucked into that, you're already playing a losing game.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, I go, I have an idea for a video, and I want to share it with everybody, and I'm going to make it the way I want to do it. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's not my best effort. Maybe it is. And, you know, if I can step back and be proud of what I made, and then see the results that matter to me, especially when you're experimenting and kind of creating a little bit of chaos and blowing things up a little bit to not start something new, but take it in a new direction, and reconceptualize it, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I don't know. You had something on the other paper that was like like indecision or decision fatigue or something.
Next
like
week's
that.
episode, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but to me, it's like,
right here actually.
Yeah.
So,
decision paralysis.
Yeah.
Like, and so
the episode that we want to kind of get into that we've outlined here a little bit is essentially like chaos and non-chaos.
Yeah.
So, what are rules that you put into place to avoid chaos? Comes from this idea of like the tyranny of freedom.
Yeah.
So like complete freedom
Right.
can just lead. And while I don't necessarily agree with that idea on a macro scale,
Yeah.
I don't agree with that idea on a macro scale. I do think it can be effective on like an individual scale.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking at your life as an individual, sometimes having some, choices that are just made
Yeah.
can be incredibly useful. And, decision paralysis. I mean, what kind of ideas does that breed for you?
For me, the first thing I think of when I see decision paralysis is I never experience it.
Yeah.
I feel like I have no trouble being decisive with things, and if anything, it would be that decisiveness can occupy a little too much space with impulsivity and impulsiveness. Is impulsivity a word? Impulsiveness, where. What was the phrase I used before? Like, think it or feel it, think it, make it, send it, or whatever.
Yeah.
I would say like you just like plow through that process without necessarily taking a step back, maybe a little bit more of an omniscient point of view, an objective point of view to go, what are we doing here? Like, what's this? What's the potential outcome of this? Is this the right move? I don't do any of that because to me it gets me into decision paralysis.
The move fast and break things.
Yeah, move fast and break things. And I think, someone could point out, well, when we look at your bank account, when we look at where you are, where you live, the house that you have, these traditional markers of success, which I push back against constantly, but still have to manage, whether it's your family's expectations, a significant other's expectations.
It's still in your head always, though.
Yeah, that stuff is just there because it's around you. You drive through a nice neighborhood like Dundee, and you know that there are people who are better off than you, that are like, I don't know, grinding harder, or they picked professions where you just get a job and you make a lot of money and you pay off your student loans in a couple of years and you're good to go. But I don't experience decision paralysis. I just get an idea. I see a vision for something, and I just go. Now, sometimes my strategy to achieve that vision is a little haphazard. It's a little messy. It's a little maybe a little irrational at times. Maybe it's a little irresponsible, even in extreme situations. And I don't know if that's sort of the curse of someone who really sees clearly what the outcome is of this path that I'm on and what I think it's going to do for me, the ROI I'm going to get, and not necessarily financial ROI, but spiritual ROI, fulfillment ROI, artistic ROI, whatever. I just, tend to go at breakneck speed and just figure it out as I go. And you could argue that there's certainly been some moments in my life where, financial things have really, shit has hit the fan and has
dictated your decision making.
Well, or the finances didn't dictate the decision making, but then something significant financially occurs. Like, I sort of, one of the things I blame the failure of my screenwriting pursuit was not having like a very disciplined strategy with finances moving to Los Angeles. How much money do you need to make? What are your expenses? How do you break stuff and move fast, but understand what your baseline needs to be? Like, you can't screw around with the amount of money you have to have in your checking account. And if that means that you suffer because you have to get this job or drive an Uber or whatever, you have to have an understanding of what you need to sacrifice in order to achieve that vision. It can't just be make a big mess, tear the whole place apart, have a blast doing it, and then hope for the best on the other side. And that would probably be the only thing in this process of complete upheaval over the last maybe 2 years, year and a half, whenever I really started moving into photography and changing a lot of my approach to the work I'm making and the content I'm making. It echoes that approach in LA, which was, I'll figure it out.
Is this like more mature Matt kind of contending with that a little bit? Like, you think that's part of the, like, I don't know. I do feel like you're approaching this from a more strategic perspective than I've come to expect. Yeah. Not that you're not a strategic person, but just like, yeah, usually you're like figuring it out on the go. And I do think that's a strength because you've learned how to, use that as a strength. But do you feel like this current kind of like, I mean, yeah, I think on our phone call, like, you even talked about kind of writing everything out and like going through, and it does feel a little more strategic. So is that like, where does that come from?
I think it honestly feels like a mess. I feel like it's really been a messy process.
Yeah.
And not that that's a bad thing, but I mean, I just look at the physical space and all of the irons I have in the fire, all the different things I'm doing, and to me, I'm glad it's happening and I'm feeling good about it, but it is incredibly messy. There's just a lot going on.
Yeah,
there are multiple YouTube channels. There are multiple sort of categories of physical things that I am acquiring to connect with different artistic.
Yeah. You're the liaison on like a bunch of like physical objects,
right? Like typewriters, cameras, stereo equipment, all that, media, physical media, from movies to tapes to vinyl, all that stuff, like just a giant mess of all of this different stuff to see sort of where it's going to end up. Mm-hmm. And the big thing right now is I feel like I'm starting to come out of the climax of it all. And I'm starting to feel the friction of too much going on. But then I'm also going, but I know this is something, this is an element I want to keep. Like, I'm never not going to have typewriters to show in my videos, to type up notes to people, to write letters. I mean, the letter I wrote my grandma, she never got it before she passed away,
which is an incredible, like holy shit. Yeah.
So
what a yeah. I told Audrey that story, and she's just like, yeah.
Well, so I busted out my knife at the funeral and ripped it open and read it to her right there in the room.
Yeah.
I didn't really remember what I wrote. It was, 2 pages, this kind of a shortened thing, and like struggle to get through it. And I sit there.
There's something so perfectly dramatic about that.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean dramatic in like the sense of like transfer of emotions and like
Well, I had that feeling too, because when I realized after I found out that my grandma passed away, I had talked to my mom on the phone, but then I forgot to ask, because she was at her house, if she had gotten the letter that I sent her earlier that week. So I called her back, and I could barely speak, and I'm like, "Did Grandma get my letter?" And she said, "No, Uncle Steve just brought it in from the mailbox." And I wasn't devastated. Like, it wasn't like this. It was just very emotional because, you have these hopes that she's going to read it.
Yeah.
Before she passes. And then I just immediately, and this goes back to decisiveness, I'm like, well, I'm going to read it to her at the funeral.
Yeah.
Like, I just immediately know what I'm going to do. And, but that all wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have even written my grandma letters had I not gotten typewriters. So I look at all that chaos and all the craziness and the financial risk of all of this and how much is being invested. And it's not tens of thousands of dollars, but it's because I am selling stuff and, making some money, but I'm sort of depriving the commerce side of my business by not focusing on making a data management course and creating some digital products, like stuff I actually really want to do, but it's not as fun as going out and buying a bunch of shit.
Part of me is like, though, do you really want to do that? Like,
I do. I do want to make a data management course because I have a very...
The incredibly sexy topic of data management.
I know. But I have a very, clear philosophy on it. Not that there's a lot of gray area to how to manage your data, but so many people just don't see how to manage data. They just don't see it. It's like they're blind to it. And I see it clearly.
I think it's just a... it's just how is your mind structured around that?
And there's nothing wrong with
some people grew up using computers and they can just...
Yeah. When I was in acting school, we had a musical theater class. I can't hear if you played Ring of Fire right now, I would have no clue when I'm supposed to start singing unless I can hear Johnny Cash in the background.
Yeah. And
I'll come in, a tenth of a second behind him because I'm waiting to hear his voice because I can't listen to music and just know when you start singing.
Count it off and
none of that stuff. Yeah. Complete blindness. So I understand when people have blindness on something like this. So I sit there and go, well, I wish there was a way that someone could teach me certain things where I'm like, oh, now I see it.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's things I can teach like data management where people are like, okay, I'm not going to memorize the steps. I'm going to get the concept. And now I can even tailor my approach based on the equipment I have or sort of the way, what's important to me, whatever. So I do get excited about something as boring as that because I think it goes back to decisiveness. I really see how I do it and how it works for me. And I want to share that.
That's the argument I always have for just talk to anybody and everybody has something that they know that you don't.
Right.
And, that's why I love stuff like this. There's the, just there's always something that you can gain from an interaction.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great, and you don't always see the world the same way as everybody else. And sometimes, most of the time, it's useful to have more than one kind of lens to view things through.
Well, and even just this conversation sort of centering around upheaval in an artist or a creative's life when things are changing, whether it's instigated by a lack of fulfillment, something traumatic happens, a big artistic failure, or you're not seeing the results you want, whatever it is that brings that up. I'm not going to sit here in an episode like this and go, all right, here are the 5 essential steps to navigating upheaval in your artistic life. Yeah. Alex, step 1, let's go.
Yeah.
It's such a gray area and it's so different for everybody, but then yet there are common experiences in that process where just talking out loud about my experience, and that's where episodes like this, or if I make a YouTube episode where I'm talking to camera about my experience, it can sometimes at the surface seem very sort of self-serving, maybe a little bit ego-driven. I just want to talk about what I'm going through. The real emotional point of it, the thing that gets me interested in talking about it, is hopefully people making connections to their experience of it, seeing what those connections are, but then also hearing how my experience of it and going, well, mine was a little bit different, or I'm going to approach it a little bit differently, or I'm going to not approach it and just sort of listen to what it wants to be and what it wants to do and ride the wave a little bit. and that's part of what gets me excited about talking about this stuff as we harvest the experiences we're going through in our creative lives, to share that experience with other people who might need to hear what somebody else is experiencing to feel better about their experience of it.
Well, you can listen to 10 people's experience of a specific situation, and you might not identify with one of those, or you might only identify with one of those. 9 of them, you just completely, okay, like, I get it. I don't see the world that way. But then if you find one that you do, it almost reshapes your one. I mean, obviously, you feel less alone. You feel an immediate connection to another human, which is always a valuable experience, I think. But yeah, it just kind of gives you, a new way of looking at the world. We talked about the Harold Bloom quote a couple of episodes ago, where it's like, I read to find a mind more original than my own. Yeah. And I think that,
And same thing, yeah. I mean, some of the books that you've shared with me and the books that I've read that have also contributed to this, everything from Technopoly to Rick Rubin's book to...
In short, I've ruined Matt's life. No.
It's always funny to me.
This podcast has ruined Matt's life.
Well, and the podcast is, again, another thing that's the result of the upheaval.
Yeah.
Because, you are going through your life and you meet certain people, you read certain books, you connect with different tools for self-expression, and they take you to new places. I met with you years ago, and, for however long it is, it's an exchange of ideas and experiences. You're just talking about what you're doing, or you want to make something together or whatever, but there's not I see what you're going through. Take a look at this, or that's interesting that you said that. Here's a book, or here's a thing, or here's a whatever that will take you farther into that thing. And to me, the relationships that I have that are the most meaningful are the ones where I have an opportunity to help someone, explore new frontiers or make deeper realizations about themselves or life around them, their work, whatever, and then vice versa. Typically in my life, I think I've been more the person that helps someone along, and I'm not often the recipient of that. And that's not to say that people that I'm close to haven't challenged my way of thinking in a productive way or a non-confrontational way, or introduced me to books or whatever that. But this stretch, that you play a big part in, the stuff that I've just consumed on my own that hasn't necessarily come directly from you, just watching older content on YouTube, hearing about new people. Hauntology just popped up for both of us, and then we shared it with each other because it's pushing our understanding a little farther, or it's opening up something new for us. And I think that whenever you have that amount of concentration of new ideas and new ways of thinking and breakthroughs in how you're approaching life, the mess that is my studio with all this stuff is just that externalized.
It's the result of that.
Yeah, it's that internal upheaval. Again, a good thing, a good upheaval, manifesting physically in the real world. And just a completely new framework for how to approach things. But here's the funny thing, and I'll wrap up my point. I always go back to this footage I have when I was leaving for college, and I was using a VHS camcorder to film my room. And I'm like, your room was just full of things that both spoke to you, whether it was nostalgia or a memento or something that just set, like created energy. you had a typewriter, you had an old computer, you had a TV, you had VHS, you had all these things that allowed you to journal and basically do what I'm doing right now as what I thought was kind of a hobby or just, I don't know, like just this compulsion to
the purest manifestation of the idea.
Yeah. Just write down, and I wasn't like philosophizing about life. I mean, I would journal about what I did that day or how I felt about what a girlfriend did or didn't do or what my hopes were, what my dreams were, stuff like that. But
a lot of people do in college.
Yeah. But it was always like, I want to consume other work. I want to have a movie on in the background. I want to read these books. And granted, they might be a little bit more pop culture stuff. It might be listening to Nirvana, watching a Bruce Lee movie, reading Jurassic Park for the third time. And not to make little of those as more popular cultural things, but this consumption and then creation, consume, create, and grow, and iterate and change and all of that. But back then, there was nothing I could do with it. I wasn't making art. I was journaling. I was not really telling stories. I wasn't creating characters and worlds and writing a novel and all that stuff. Although I think that journaling would have led to that, and it did with screenwriting.
I think you almost need to focus more on capturing, like, it's just photography or video is just the means of translation at this point. I think you need to almost turn the lens on what is art? It's the externalization of the internal.
Right.
And you literally just kind of made the connection of your studio is this externalization of this change period.
Yes, completely.
Turn your camera on that. Like all the way down to maybe individual, VHS spines.
Yeah.
And then all the way out. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like there's something worth attempting to document there.
Yeah.
And it might not be clear right now, but again, just kind of get into it, send it.
Yeah.
And then it'll make itself more clear over the next, 12, 24 months, but at least you have it because I do feel like you are going through a period where you're starting to like, okay, let's get this down to the more essential. Yeah. So you might as well capture it while it's at its peak.
And I think it's evolving the channel from being a Final Cut Pro tutorial channel to like kind of like an artistic project channel, like it's not, I'm going to sit and edit my first roll of medium format stuff and then like go through the process of how I'm going to take that from just these stills and then turn it into a piece of work, right? Yeah. Whether it's a zine or a video or whatever I make. But a video about, I don't want to use this piece of software. I want to use this old software that's not around anymore. So I'm going to make a video about me figuring out the tool I need to make the work.
Right.
And then there may be some other outlet for the work, whether, again, it's a zine or a gallery showing, or it's my photography channel, which is, again, kind of half the work, half the process. But all of it is sort of storytelling and sharing what I'm going through to create the foundation for the first time in my life making work that is not hijacking art to like get money.
Yeah. Using it
to feel better, to get secure, to meet the expectations that I think culture places on me as a white Midwestern male that should be here but isn't.
Yeah.
This upheaval is a result of breaking that hold.
Yeah.
That has had on me since I graduated high school and really college with debt and all of a sudden adult responsibility that I was not prepared to deal with because my whole childhood was go outside and play and just think it, feel it, send it.
Yeah.
Go. Repeat.
You're like Kevin Spacey in American Beauty without the...
Yeah. I just picked that up on VHS too. I should pop that in. And I think you know people talk about midlife crisis. They talk about people reaching a point in their life, and it's sometimes a breaking point in a movie like Falling Down, which kind of goes toward the a negative tactics to manage that upheaval. But then, something like American
at some point,
Beauty
like the
or other
expectations or the false reality kind of starts to shatter.
Yeah.
And it's not that it starts to shatter at midlife, but it starts to shatter. Eventually it becomes so shattered that there's no repairing it.
Yeah.
And you have to find what exists on the other side of that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a lot of what's at the core of it, which is a completely new understanding of how this all works.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I know I put it all back to pop culture, but it's like, Neo in the Matrix, like, okay, well, you think this is all real. It's not. This is what reality is. And obviously it's a sci-fi movie with, action and fighting and all that, but that core idea of what you think is real or the truth or sort of how things work, that you may need to destroy all that, or that may all be destroyed, and you have to
re-examine your relationship to those ideas and to those
and what's most important. And I think that goes back to everything we've talked about on this podcast about, submit, surrender, listen. I talk a lot about with my wife about doing things to make a reality that doesn't exist, whether you lost that reality because, maybe you lost your keys in the car and you want to bring back the reality that existed before you did that stupid thing, and you're doing dumb things or mean things or shitty things or whatever it is to try to bring that reality back to the forefront instead of just embracing your new reality, which is you've got your keys locked in the car. You got to figure this out.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Because that reality is over. You have a new thing. And that's what I think of this. It's like the old ways of thinking and the old habits you had and all of that stuff, like that's all done. Now rebuild what's left into a new way of doing things, and there's going to be some great moments that come out of it, and there might also be conflict. It may be difficult for the ones that are close to you to understand what you're going through, or that you think that this thing that you did care about before is bullshit now, and you're not going to waste time trying to make that thing happen or that expectation on you become a reality.
Yeah. That's powerful. Yeah.
So yeah. Decision paralysis. I know that's only a tiny little part of the topics that you laid out, but one of the things I'm most proud of with me as a person is I never have decision paralysis, man.
Yeah.
Never.
I don't know what my relationship to decision paralysis is, but I'm partially envious because part of me thinks I have decision paralysis, but then I don't really know if decision paralysis is the issue, but maybe just what's worth pursuing.
Yeah.
I'm almost the opposite of you in the sense that I am very I try to think things through to their conclusion or logical conclusion. Although I do recognize, there's a bit of a paradox because I do recognize that most things can't be seen through to their logical conclusion. So there is a factor of risk that works itself in, or maybe not even risk, just a factor of, you talked kind of about not having an expectation for the moment, just being in the moment.
Yeah.
That's something I subscribe to, but yeah, I don't know if I'd call it decision paralysis, but there's also maybe decision delay.
Yeah. Well, I wonder too if it's this, I think people can approach sort of the answer or achieving peace with an idea, or well, maybe I am interested in that, or maybe that is a good route for me. Maybe you're someone that is really capable of deploying logic and objectivity and rational thought on something, but it's a lengthy process. You really have to envision it, imagine it, sort of experience it without doing it to arrive at a conclusion. And for me, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I have to do it. I have to go.
Just
I don't
get
know.
in the water.
I don't know if picking up stereo equipment at estate sales is gonna, give me a little extra coin in my pocket that keeps this train moving along.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be a total waste of time. Well, I'm gonna try it.
Send it.
Yeah. Oh, there's a stereo there. I'll send a picture to this guy, see what he thinks. He says he'd pay this much for it. That's more money than I'm paying for it. Great. Let's try it.
Yeah.
Let's see how much work goes into this. Do I have to clean it? Whatever. What kind of fulfillment do I get? Is it just fun to do it? And like that's profit to me is learning or the experience. Or now I know how a record player works. Oh, that's how you change a belt? Oh, I didn't know that before. And like do it for a couple of weeks and then just see how you feel. Because I will at the end of it go, fuck it, man, that was a waste of time. I'm not doing this anymore. I got bigger fish to fry. Or I might go, I don't know, this is really kind of cool. Like I'm able to pick this stuff up for $20, sell it to this guy for $100.
I feel like I definitely do that from time to time, but I think I've gotten burned by it enough where I've done something.
Yeah.
And then I've been like, well, that totally wasn't worth the time.
Yeah.
And then I just feel like this sense of just, complete waste of,
And I am such a glass half full person that I'll go, that sucked. But I met this guy and like, we're not BFF or anything, but now I can go into that store and have a conversation
and I'm pretty good at finding the positive, but there is just like a equation that runs in my head every time of like, I could be doing this or I could be doing this. And at this point, there's just, although I do pick up new hobbies, I mean, that's definitely something that happens, but I am more just like, okay, I have a lot of things in my life that I enjoy. And once you reach a certain point, it's like, all right, if I start adding new things to that, I'm going to have to pull one of these other things out. And just the math equation of is this new thing worth losing that thing? And
I'm never good at math.
Yeah. Neither am I.
Let me ask you this. I know how close are we on time?
We're right. Got about a minute.
Okay. So we don't have to go into this too much, but I'm, have been in this upheaval really since photography started, buying cameras and going through all of this stuff with you, with the stuff that I've read, the stuff I've discovered, all of that upheaval, right? I feel like I'm just starting to come out of the climax of it.
Yeah.
And where are you right now?
Yeah.
What's your state?
I don't know. I'm just kind of like in it right now. Like everything I do, I'm like, okay, like, I can take my time with this. I don't have any like, I don't know. I don't have anything that I'm trying to get done like immediately. Everything's just kind of like, okay, I've got time.
A little chill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chill, like not to say I'm completely content.
No. But just like things aren't like super high stakes.
Fall's
like,
coming up. I'm going to enjoy it. Like there's nothing that's like super pressing.
Yeah.
I'm a little stressed because, I'm like, I want to get to like a few episodes in the reserve for like stupid things like that.
For this. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just kind of in it right now.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like letting the waves carry me.
Yeah.
And, I'm buying like 40 books a week.
Yeah.
That's a bit much. I'm not buying that many.
Like, well,
and 20.
And you could argue that there's you're in a real strong consumption cycle right now of like absorbing new ideas.
Well, and usually what happens, and the way I've seen it, and I'll wrap this up here in just a second because we're literally at time, but I'm consuming everything right now, and I can still go outside. I can still experience things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to get out and like continue to do stuff, continue to read stuff, continue to like experience this, talk to this person, meet this, go to this place, do that. When December gets here, like we're going to be inside.
Yeah.
You know, other than this podcast, this happens every year, you know, I'm going to be sitting at that desk and it's going to be getting dark at 5 and I'm not going to be wanting to go for runs and things like that. So I'm going to probably move to, it's going to be, you know, the days are going to be shorter, the mornings are going to be cold. So usually that's when the output starts to kick back up.
Sure. Yeah.
I would love more consistent output. I don't know what that looks like though. So
yeah,
we'll figure it out.
Well, with it being a year, it's interesting, especially the year of this. And I don't know if people look back, if they've listened to or watched every episode, because a lot of these conversations have been you asking me questions and me talking about my experience. And I think some of that is because there's a little bit more drama in the upheaval that I'm going through.
Yeah. We're using you for views.
And you have a little bit more consistency in what you're doing and your approach and all of that stuff. A little bit more even keel right now, or I'm a little bit more tumultuous. But
is year 2 going to flip-flop it?
I know. I'll be curious what season 2 holds, and especially if my assessment that I'm kind of coming out of the climax of this upheaval, what year 2 will look like as I come to a conclusion of this season in my life, and then am making things.
Back in the day, there was
was
a Reddit bot that you could ask to remind you on this date.
Yeah,
we need that. Like, remind me on this date.
Well, I plug this in as an anniversary in my calendar, so every year it tells us when we hit our anniversary, and then YouTube Studio put a little cake with candles that told us it was our 1 year anniversary.
Nice.
So thanks, YouTube.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer.